to speak.
Yeah, what is it, Charlie? Tell me.
No, see, we'd have to actually. It is Shakespearean in its eloquence, so that it's one of those things. Yeah, it's David Simon, the author and the screenwriter, versus Hugh Hewitt, and he got himself cranked up and everything, and it is awesome. I mean,
what is it about?
It's not about anything. It's about I hate you too, and it's like you're playing some bullshit Hollywood elitist game and everything, and it's sort of like he got himself cranked up to do this. So these are the moments where social media like redeems itself. It's like if William Shakespeare, had a Twitter account and he just wanted to rip somebody.
It's like a bar fight, but we get to watch.
Yeah, and you get to watch it in real time.
Yeah, like a 1 a.m. kind of you suck, no, you suck, and
yeah, but better, but with people who are wordsmiths.
Yeah,
well, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I'm insulting David Simon. He's better than that.
New ways to curse people out from David Simon. Like,
oh yeah,
I would never call somebody. It's early in the show, right? I would never call somebody a fuck squib because it wouldn't occur to me.
What does that mean?
But see, that's good.
He made it up.
Yeah, it doesn't even mean anything. It's just funny.
That's like a shot, it's like be shitted and be spittled deplorate. Is that a word? Like the deplorables?
They're all just amazing made up insults.
It's great.
It's like a new genre.
Shakespeare made up a lot of words. So
I think we've kind of exhausted language in the last 4 years. So anybody that does anything that can, just bring it back. That's why I'm trying to reintroduce retro.
Yeah. Charlie, oh yes, that was a good one. But there's another one you introduced that embarrasses me.
I know.
Why you bring it up? You're like tempting me to say it on the air.
No, what was the ret word? What was that one?
Not doing it. No.
Retromingent.
Retromingent. Yeah.
What's that mean?
Well, that's the thing is you go, hey, could I learn a new word today?
But should I? Now I don't trust you if I should learn new words from
that
Charlie,
one that one you should definitely look up.
Oh, see,
Mona says it's okay. I'm good.
Amanda, next time you are on CNN with Scaramucci, you just
that will never happen again.
You say, Mooch, you are a retro-mingent hack.
And he'll squib.
What?
It means to urinate backwards, Amanda.
Yeah.
Ew. Really?
Yeah.
Such as a raccoon that urinates backwards.
Is this an Urban Dictionary thing?
It sounds like a biologist thing.
No, it's really, it's a real thing.
Is it a defect?
Not for a raccoon.
I don't know. But see, the thing about it is that, Hugh Hewitt, okay, by the way, for people who are just tuning in, we haven't actually started the show yet. We figured that what we would do is we would let everybody get into the room and start, because we'd heard from people saying, hey, just you let us in and then you start going and we missed the first 5 minutes. So we are literally kind of filibustering, I suppose, except this is interesting because see, the wonderful part about this is that Hugh Hewitt does not know that he's completely out of his league, right? I mean, this is the thing. Hugh Hewitt thinks that he can play at the David Simon level, which is ridiculous. Because, I mean, the guy is the most vanilla, unimaginative, recycled hack alive. And, David Simon's this is the guy that wrote The Wire, right? I mean, it's just like.
But look at all the new words we're learning now.
Yeah. Well, I think that we need to do that. That's why I follow Benjamin Wittes's Twitter.
But it's huge.
You don't learn new words from my Twitter feed.
Benjamin's really going to class it up tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna. First of all, I just want to say you're all very special. We love you.
We will remember this day forever.
We will remember this day forever.
Yeah,
love and peace.
I love you. Which is my way of saying, please, you've done something absolutely horrible. Okay, so I do want to clear up something that's going to be a very controversial issue later. I am not wearing a purple sweater. Does it look like a purple sweater to you?
I thought you were going to say you were not wearing pants or something.
It looks blue. Is it
We're
blue?
fine with purple.
Okay, because
fine.
it looks purple because I think it's my camera on the thing, so it's actually not. So you guys
Okay.
want to actually get started with business because we have a lot of the Bulwark Plus folks who have joined us. We did not want to get started with this until everybody was settled in. So welcome to, what are we calling this? Thursday night Bulwark Plus exclusive live streams. We're going to do this every Thursday night. And this seemed like a really good third day. We haven't had a bad Thursday night to do it. When you think about everything that's happened every single week this year, I mean, be honest, wasn't there like in the little back of your mind, you're thinking, so after the election, are we gonna have anything to talk about? Is there gonna be anything going on that would happen? And well, then at least after the inauguration, we have anything to talk about? Well, we sure do. Day 3 of impeachment has wrapped up. We just heard that the Trump lawyers are going to not take their full 16 hours that they have. They could have gone all day on Friday and Saturday, and apparently they're just going to go for 3 or 4 hours. And I don't know if you saw it, Sarah, but I stole a line from you from
as well you should.
Well, stole a line from you that the lawyers basically figured out that they could walk into the Senate chambers and they could just flip off everybody and go, suck it. And they win the case, right? I mean, they know that. There's nothing they can do. The Republicans will still vote to acquit. So Benjamin Wittes, our good friend from Lawfare, let me just throw it to you. We've watched 3 days of this. What is your take? How have the House managers done in your estimation?
So look, they have their hands tied behind their backs, right? If you were a courtroom litigator and you wanted to tell this story, you would do it through witnesses, and they are not allowed to do that. So they're basically confined to the most boring thing you're allowed to do in court, which is make a speech. And they have basically 16 hours and they're only allowed to speechify. So they're basically sentenced to be like members of the House or Senate. And that is very hard. And given that, I think they did a spectacular job. I think I've watched a lot of what you might call legislative litigation over the years, both in committee hearings and in impeachment trials. I've never seen anything like it. The presentation was incredibly disciplined. It was well organized. It was systematic. At several of the presenters were spectacular, particularly Joe Neguse and Stacey Plaskett, I thought were, and Cicilline was very, very fine too, as was Raskin himself. And so they had a group of people who were actually serious about presenting the material in a coherent, organized fashion. And look, would it be better if they were able to tell this story the way you would tell it in the district court? Yes. Did they played the hand they were dealt exceptionally well. And I think Raskin deserves a lot of credit for that, for taking a team of people and thinking about it from the audience point of view, which, by the way, Congress isn't always so good at. They're very supply side oriented, because the egos are so big. They really did a good job with this, and I think, I was trying to figure out if I were a competent lawyer who had to get up tomorrow and talk for 4, 5, or up to 16 hours in defense of the president, what would be the case I would make? And there is no simple answer to that question. And that's because these guys did a really good job, closing a lot of doors to you. So my hat is off to them. I think they were dealt a lousy hand and they played it extremely well.
See, I was actually kind of blown away by how riveting they were. Yes, I mean, they obviously had some limitation, but that was an incredible feat on their part. The way they laid out the case, they connected the dots. The way they used the video was incredibly skillful. They acted like a team. They told a coherent narrative. Yep. We really got a sense. I wasn't sure that they were going to cast such a wide net going back, establishing, all of the things that Donald Trump lied about, the way that he encouraged the lies, his ties to the people that committed the violent acts, his dereliction of duty. I mean, it was masterful. So before we get to the panel, though, so what is your take as of right now on this question of witnesses? Because they can call witnesses if they've apparently decided not to call witnesses, but should they have done so? Would you have liked to have seen, for example, Mike Pence come and testify under oath about what he was thinking?
So first of all, it's not clear to me that they can call witnesses.
Okay.
Because the organizing resolution says basically you go through these 16 hours on both sides, then the senators ask their questions, and then the Senate will entertain motions for witnesses. So if they wanted to call a witness, you'd have to have some senators move for it, or they could move for it, I suppose. But then they'd have to be able to sustain, get it past a vote, because you'd have an objection. There are Republicans want to move on for obvious embarrassment reasons, but a lot of Democrats want to move on for, legislative business reasons. Yeah. And so there's a kind of, from my point of view, unholy alliance between the Republicans and the Democrats about not dragging this out, and what both are doing their various reasons at the expense of is the presentation of the case. Yeah. Yes, I would like to hear from Mike Pence. I would also like to hear from Mark Meadows. I think the weakness of the manager's case is the period of time between when Trump gives that speech and when he finally goes out there and releases that Twitter video. Who is he talking to? Everything we know about that period, or almost everything, is from anonymously sourced news stories. And I think it's a little bit unfortunate that we don't have sworn record testimony on that stuff, particularly because I think the reality of that period is extremely damning to him. And so if I were them, I would want to get that on the record. That said, if I were a Democratic senator and I wanted to get Merrick Garland confirmed, and I wanted to have time to, do some sub-cabinet stuff, and I want to pass a coronavirus bill, and I know we're not going to change votes on this, right? So, you got your ceiling of 6, maybe 8, whatever the ceiling is, it's not going to go much higher. And so the diminishing marginal returns of doing the full presentation is maybe hard to justify if you're a generalist. I'm not a generalist. This is what I think about. Okay. So I want to call everybody.
All right, let's go around the horn. Mona.
Okay, I would like to concur in part and dissent in part from Justice Wittes. I agree that the presentation was masterful. I disagree that witnesses would necessarily have helped the case. First of all, you never know what a witness is going to say. And we've had enough experience with these people surrounding Trump that they lie like rugs. And it could be that, we imagine them saying, yeah, we were all begging the president to call in the National Guard, and he just kept saying no, but they won't do that. They'll say, well, the president was quite concerned. Of course, some people said X, some people said Y. You don't necessarily get what you're hoping you're going to get from witnesses. That's one thing. The other thing is, the audience in a trial is just the jury. So you want the live witnesses there, and you have that immediacy. In this case, the jury is also, it is technically the 100 senators, but it's also all of the American people. And that tightly scripted and crafted presentation that they made with no slip-ups and weaving that whole story was incredibly powerful. And I think it would have been diminished, actually, by having live witnesses with all their unpredictability.
Amanda.
Yeah, I do think that the period from when the rally started until the riot ended is sort of up for grabs if we were having a real trial here. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if Lindsey Graham and Cruz and I guess Mike Lee, who are conferencing with the defense lawyers, weren't trying to game out who they actually could call as a witness to testify that maybe Donald Trump did try to do something. To me, that still wouldn't answer the buildup of events in the series of systematic, deliberate, and malicious steps that Donald Trump took starting election night to stop the certification of Joe Biden that began, pre-election and went through January 6th. But The thing that I am most curious about, and I want to ask Ben if he thinks could lead to later investigations, either criminally or within the House side, has to do with that permit and how that permit was changed. And that just seems like it was just a quick minute or two presented in the presentation yesterday about how the White House worked with the outside groups to change the permit from January 20th to January 6th, and not only change the date of the permit, but change the permit to allow people to march to the Capitol. And so if we are going to open the witness door, I want to know specifically who is involved with that, because that not only takes the ring to Donald Trump, but expands the ring of responsibility to a lot of people in the conservative movement who planned that rally and do need to be held responsible and have not had to answer a single question. Because, I mean, maybe you could pretend that Donald Trump didn't know what was going to happen, but certainly the organizers who were busing people in, putting them in hotels on the ground with them, letting them in, mixing with them in the crowd, knew what was going to happen. So those are things I have questions about and I'd like Ben to answer, but also I am thinking about how we should message this, you know, with my communications background, knowing what the conclusion of this trial is going to be, that the outcome is certain, that he is going to be acquitted. So this is all essentially a show trial being put on to give the presentation, the illusion of justice, when it's rigged. There's a foregone conclusion. And I think we need to kind of drill that in and freeze these pictures of the senators coming out and saying, nothing's changed. I've watched all this, is nothing changed. Then you were never seriously engaged in this enterprise. Let's call it what it is. It's a show trial. And let's look for other ways to find justice, if Ben would like to talk about that.
Hey, Ben.
So look, on the permit issue, that is a very good example of something that you can assert in a speech and you can develop with a witness. Now, I agree with Mona that ideally you would want to examine these witnesses privately in, say, a closed deposition in the SCIF at the House Intelligence Committee. But of course, then you have lots of people yelling at you that you're doing stuff in secret, which is what happened during the Ukraine investigation. It's a total no-win situation. You can develop you can develop the record with witnesses, or you can assert it in speeches. It's a very good example of the point. I also agree with you that, and this, you know, to the extent you're saying, hey, since this is actually a rigged system, and it is, maybe this isn't the place to do this. Maybe this is the place to make a bunch of speeches, embarrass, you know, make the Republicans squirm. They will vote the way they're going to vote anyway. And then you go to other venues to get your actual remedies. And in this case, I think, you know, the big gaping one is the Fulton County District Attorney, honestly, which is not about January 6th, but it is about December 20, whatever it was. And, you know, it's the same period. And I just think Trump did himself a world of hurt with that phone call to Raffensperger.
Yeah, I want to come back to this question about what comes next, but I want to go to Sarah to get your take on the first 3 days.
I mean, yeah, I'm torn on the question of witnesses because obviously I want them to throw the kitchen sink at this guy. That being said, I think they've done it like the best substitute teacher you ever had in high school, which is they mostly showed videos. And like the videos killed, right? Like the video on the first day was like 16 minutes of hell to sit through.
13.
And it brought you back to that day, which I think was always their big task, was could they reassert the emotion of the day, the threat of the day? And they've managed to, I think, sustain the terror of the day and like how big the threat was over multiple days, which is the biggest takeaway. I was actually nervous after the first day because they did such an amazing job. And then Trump's lawyer got up there and like, just like put on the most bizarre performance. And I was like, oh no, everybody's going to talk about this guy's performance and not focus on what a good presentation that was. I was actually doing Ben's show that day. I talked about it right afterwards where I was like, this is my worry coming out of it. But over the next 2 days, they managed to stick with that level. And so much of it was, we're going to find every Republican we can who is on camera saying, call this thing off, do something about it. We're going to get Chris Christie. And they managed to just really bring it back home. I will say, to Amanda's point about the PR and the fact that we know they're going to quit, the other thing that I think they're doing really well is that they are engaging in a trial that feels like they're not assuming that. It feels like they are going at this as though people could still change their minds. And there's a part of me that always hates it when we make it a foregone conclusion that Republicans are going to acquit, because it leaves no room. Like, we're basically letting them off the hook. We're all saying they're so craven that they're never going to change their mind on this. And that gives them the space they need to behave that way. Like, there's just a part of me that's like, all we should be saying is, any reasonable, rational person, when presented with this evidence, who is tethered to reality, would convict this person. And Republicans should do that if they have any decency, any honor in this moment. And so I'm glad that the House managers are playing it like that. But what amazes me, these guys aren't even sitting through it.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, that was bad.
The CNN reporting today was what, 15 of them
18,
weren't even in the chamber. That is the kind of thing that we should be jamming down their throats. You know why? Because the Dems are doing everything to hold up a mirror and say, look at this. You have to look at it. And because they couldn't handle it the first couple of days, they just pieced out.
Yeah, they decided. Yeah. And they wanted to trivialize it. I mean, what's interesting is the way they want to shrink the moment. And I think that the House managers have done a great job of saying, look, this is a major event. This is a big deal. This is an historic event. This was an attack on democracy on the Capitol. And what the Republicans and the Trump folks have to do is try to make it as small as possible. Oh, there's nothing to see here. Amanda, you were talking about the piece of evidence about the permit. I was really struck, and it sort of took overnight for people to sort of, I think, get their heads around that Tommy Tuberville revelation that Donald Trump had called him on the phone in the midst of this attack, and that Tuberville had told him that Mike Pence had basically gone into hiding. And it was 10 minutes after that Donald Trump tweeted out his attack on Mike Pence. So in terms of this period, what was he doing during the day? He was acting like somebody throughout the day who liked what was going on. He was not acting like somebody who was mad about it. I thought that was really extraordinary. But to Mona's point about the audience here, look, yes, actually, and Sarah's is as well. I really like the fact that they are not giving this up, that they honestly think that we can change hearts and minds. So they might not be able to do that among the 45 Republican senators, but there's this bigger audience out there, and we just don't know whether it makes a difference or not, whether it's going to make a difference on the margin. But it doesn't feel like it's going to be over. So I want to bounce this back to you, Benjamin, that at the end of this, there's going to be a vote. 55, 45, 56, 44, who knows, to convict, which means that he will be found not guilty. But they have really laid out so much of this evidence. They've made it so dramatic. What are the next possible steps? You mentioned one, the investigation down in Georgia, which is live and it's real. What about the possibility of grand jury investigations that expand their scope to conspiracy? And finally, what about a 9/11 type commission that is impaneled to look at this? Now, there may not be legal consequences, but in terms of establishing the magnitude of this and the awfulness of Donald Trump's behavior, I mean, are there other things that will follow from this trial?
I think there are.
Or ought to follow.
Well, I don't know if they'll follow from this trial, but I think they will follow sequentially. So a few things. The first, I am not an expert on Georgia law by any means. And you know what I don't know what the prospects of that are, except that I think anytime you have a tape where somebody is asking a vote counting official to find the precise number of votes he needs to flip the result of an election, you have a presumptive piece of criminality there. And I think that's going to be a significant problem. Look, there are some now number of 100 people charged in connection with this event. And the big thing that's going to start happening is they're going to start reaching plea deals. And when you reach a plea deal with federal prosecutors, you have to cooperate. And, you know, they generally have what are called cooperation clauses in these plea deals. And if you're a smart federal prosecutor, you're consolidating a lot of these cases, you're thinking about them collectively, and you're thinking about this as an organized activity that you're trying to go up a chain of. Now, how high up you can go, I don't want to make predictions about that, but there's a lot of defendants here. And that means that, you know, and some of them have really significant criminal exposure. I mean, if you're in there trying to kill Nancy Pelosi, you know, you've broken into the House of Representatives in order to hunt down and hang the Vice President of the United States, you've got a mess of criminal exposure. I mean, you're talking really serious stuff there.
And then how many, like, would this take years to prosecute out? What are we talking about in a timeline? Just because there's so many people, I have no idea.
Well, when, you know, it depends which cases you're talking about. I mean, the cases that end up looking more and more like terrorism cases, yeah, they'll take a while. But what's really going to happen, remember, 96+% of all federal criminal cases plead out.
Yeah.
And so these are, you know, and so if you're thinking about this from the point of view of the federal prosecutors who are running this show, they're thinking about this as a pool of possible defendants that can implicate potentially other people. And so I think that's the area of immediate criminal consequence. Now, does that stuff reach the president, a former president? I have no idea.
Okay, so when Merrick Garland finally gets confirmed as Attorney General, he could appoint a special counsel, right, to impanel a grand jury and investigate this.
But there's no reason why he would appoint a special counsel.
But he
would have it done by the Justice Department in the regular order.
Okay, so where does RICO fit into all this?
I think it almost certainly doesn't.
It does not. Okay.
Well, because, you know, RICO is about the corrupting, the use of organizations by criminal organizations, right? And here, these people are just doing it themselves, right? So I don't think it's a RICO question. This isn't like the mob infiltrating a union, which is what RICO is really about. Okay. There's a major conspiracy question here. And you saw today there was a big Proud Boys case with another 5 people charged with conspiracy. The question is whether there's, you know, some sort of higher altitude conspirators that, that aren't just, you know, a group of thugs planning to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan, right? Or in this case, the Speaker of the House and the Vice President, whether there's a kind of more organized effort. And I think, I don't know the answer to that question, but that grand jury already exists.
Okay,
there's one other element, Charlie, if I may, and that is there is civil liability. That's a possibility too, right? I mean, there was something like 140 police who were injured, some severely. You could imagine that the family of Officer Sicknick and others might want to file a wrongful death suit, suggesting that people up to and including the former president were part of a conspiracy that led to their deaths and injuries. So that is another possibility. And in fact, somebody in the White House, I think the lawyer, alerted Trump to this possibility in real time, saying, think OJ.
Well, also, you know, now that you mentioned the civil liability, I mean, think about the impact of the Dominion and the Smartmatic lawsuits on potentially on the media ecosystem.
The only accountability we have in America.
Yeah, I mean, that may be what brings down Rudy Giuliani. So Sarah, you had a piece earlier this week, holding them all accountable, really raising the question about all of the other people who are accessories here, you know, and it is kind of interesting. You have these hundreds of people who are facing jail time because they had been goaded and incited into attacking the Capitol. They had been, part of this delusion. And it's not just Donald Trump. It's a lot of the people sitting as the jurors right now, the Josh Hawleys, all of the other people who went along with the big lie. And so you said we need to hold them accountable. How? Other than the ballot box, which I'm skeptical that that's actually going to happen. But how are you going to hold all the other people, the elites who really push this to happen, and yet they're going to be sitting there? Nothing will happen to them, no consequences. Well, hundreds of people are going to be going to jail potentially for listening to them.
Yeah, I mean, accountability is tough for that middle tier. I mean, Donald Trump will probably evade real accountability, but he is going through this trial, right? I mean, he is going through the process of impeachment. There's at least a mechanism for that. These people who stormed the Capitol, whose heads were filled with poison and pointed right at the Capitol like a loaded weapon by Donald Trump, wasn't just Donald Trump. Donald Trump is uniquely responsible. He did a bunch of things that make him uniquely responsible, both his speech right beforehand and the way he behaved as president afterwards, and the fact that he is the ground zero of the lie, right? Like the rest of the Republicans weren't going to tell this lie if Donald Trump didn't really start pushing this lie. But you cannot escape the fact that Kevin McCarthy went on TV and said, Donald Trump won this election. That Madison Cawthorn stood on the Turning Point USA stage and said, call your congressman, lightly threaten them. That's fine. Go ahead and do it because this election is being stolen from you. Louis Gohmert said after his stupid case was thrown out, was trying to force Pence to overturn the election, said, you got to go to the streets and be violent. It's the only option left. Okay. Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, there was a bunch of people who lied, Louis Gohmert, Paul Gosar, they all said this thing was stolen, this thing was rigged, to the point where right after the election, 50 million Americans didn't think the election was in dispute. It took weeks to get there because they convinced people that this thing was wrong. So the fact that those people, those very people who told those lies, not only are they witnesses to the crime, not only are they jurors now in the crime, they are accessories to the crime. And so while I love to be optimistic about, and I would love to be here placing bets on, and look, I'm still going to take long odds on Mitch McConnell convicting. Well, I would love to be the voice saying, look, I think we're going to get a bunch more than people think. The reason that I don't think so is to indict Donald Trump for this, to convict him for this, is to convict, in many cases, themselves or at minimum their colleagues, right? And so what do you do about these people? It's tough. I mean, the best thing that you can do is to exert the kind of social pressure that comes from having a bright line between right and wrong. And so this is where you need corporations to show the kind of moral leadership, and they've been to some degree, right? There's a lot of people who have pulled back and said, I'm not going to donate to people who lied about this election being stolen. But some of that stuff is like CYA stuff in the front end. The question is can you make that sustainable? Can you make it a litmus test for support going forward that anybody who lied about this election cannot be taken seriously? They are disqualified from holding public office because it should be disqualifying.
Well, that's why this trial can't be the end of the process. I mean, that's why there's got to be something else. I mean, I think they've done a magnificent, I was a little skeptical about whether this was going to be boring, whether it was maybe a tactical mistake. I'm completely on board now because of the public education process. I mean, they have teed this up to say, going forward, look, are we going to draw this bright line? So Amanda, how do you see, does this change anything? What does this do to the Republican Party? I'm gonna give you an easy question. What do you think the final vote's going to be? Probably this weekend. What do you think it's going to be?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping to get more than 5. That's like my good scenario. But I do think things change primarily because you see Republican senators still sort of begging the White House to give them the out. Yeah. Rand Paul disagree with what he did, but what he did was tactically brilliant to try to disqualify it on constitutional grounds from the outset so that nobody ever had to actually engage with the real question of whether Donald Trump incited the riot or not. But you can see that they're still worried. Like they know saying, I don't think the trial is constitutional is not going to be the right answer for the rest of their political lives. They need something more to show that Donald Trump disagreed with what happened. And to this date, Donald Trump has refused to provide anything. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. I fully believe that Cruz and Lee and Graham are conferencing with the defense team right now to try to get a better answer, because they know they're going to give them nothing, judging by the performance so far.
But
and just
what is the better answer?
I think they want to come up with something. Show us something that Donald Trump did to try to avert
they're going to show videos of black people burning down 7-Elevens.
Of course they will. But I'm just saying, I think even they recognize that's not enough. Yes, and Donald Trump is going to be acquitted, but that does not solve the problem for them long term, because Sarah's right. This is going to be a litmus test. The Republican Party is losing voters over this. How many people change their voter registrations after January? That kind of stuff does not happen. Okay. They know they have a problem. They don't know how to fix it. And that's where, you know, I am very upset with how this is going to turn out. But I think there's lots of opportunity for people like us to rush in after this, define the terms of this debate, and set limit tests going forward, based primarily on what people did now and what they will do going forward on the basic, easy question of, one, is Joe Biden the rightful president? And number two, does every person in America have a right to vote and be counted? Like, those are very simple things that they can't say yes to. Okay, but a year ago, by May, everybody'd forgotten about impeachment. Remember, we'd always joke about it. But everyone's going to care about the right to vote. That's what this is all about. What is this going to be different than that? By May, have we forgotten about it, or is it going to have legs to come back to it? And I think one of the reasons why it's not going to go away is because it was on television. The fact that it was so visual. And if there's one thing that we've learned, is that if people can see a picture of something, it's going to have a greater impact. And of course, it is going to be the votes as well. So, okay, Ben, it struck me that today was not as dramatic as yesterday, but I think they got to the real heart of this entire trial, which is to say, look, if you don't convict him, Donald Trump could run for office again in 4 years. He will lose, but he will do this again, that he will continue to foment violence, because we know from the trial they can't remove him from office. The only thing is the disqualification in the future. And I thought it was really interesting that, having laid out all of this story, they said the key is, if you don't draw that bright red line now, it will happen again. I think that's true, and I think that's powerful.
I agree. I also did think they did something else today that was is going to hurt for the Sarah Longwells and Amanda Carpenters who do messaging. Among other things, there was a real gift today, which is reminding Republican senators that a bunch of the victims here are law enforcement people. Okay. And, this is a party that has organized, including over the last year, in a big way behind the idea that it is the law and order party. It is on the side of, it's against rioting, right? It's against, it's for when the blue line forms, we're on the side of the blue, right? Here you had a bunch of people who were trying to kill cops, and there's the Republican senators are going to vote that's okay. And they're going to make some noise about it, like, oh, we're not saying that, prosecute the individuals, but, they're the guy who called it out and who kind of animated it and made it happen. They're going to say, that's okay. He gets a mulligan, or he didn't really cause any of it. Their language will be different. That's going to be a very damaging thing, I would for a bunch of them.
No, I think I heard you, Sarah, making this point, though, why they haven't made a bigger deal about the faces and the stories of the individual cops, when you have all of these dozens of cops who are very, badly beaten. The one thing that the right has really done well on, if you have one police officer who is injured or killed in an Antifa Black Lives Matter, riot, that person is going to be featured on Fox News 24/7 for weeks. But Mona, it did occur to me, I was making notes for, possible things to write in the future. And I wrote down on my pad, Blue Lives Matter was a lie, wasn't it? I mean, how do you watch this and watch Trump world attacking the Capitol, talking about, fuck the blue, fuck, doing all this, the savagery, the violence aimed at the cops from this movement that has spent the last year telling us, about how pro-police they are? Was it always a lie?
Well, it's
to quote Sue Stevens.
Oh yeah, look, it's extremely damaging to their image as the law and order party. That goes without saying. And if you don't mind indulging me, I want to just push back a little bit on this notion that a lot of the Republicans are retreating to now, which is they're saying, well, yes, this was not good. We don't approve of violence, and we don't think that the mob should have come to the Capitol. On the other hand, Maxine Waters said something once that was, or look at what Antifa did over the summer, or look at how the cities were burning because of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, so the fact is, first of all, leading Democratic politicians like the guy who was running on the Democratic ticket for president did condemn the violence that was happening over the summer in no uncertain terms, unlike the way Trump is adamantly unwilling to ever criticize any kind of right-wing extremism or violence. And the second thing is that these smattering of low-level Democrats, who once said a bad thing, as if that can possibly compare with the systematic lying and undermining of our system that the president did. You cannot conceive of a more fundamental attack on our democracy than what he did. Undermining faith in the democratic process at the first part, and the second part, then pressuring elected officials who are counting votes to cheat, and then third, sicking a violent mob on the Congress of the United States as it's counting the electoral votes. I mean, if you were writing fiction, you could not come up with a more profound threat to our way of life, to everything that Americans believe in and hold sacred than those three things. He did them all. We all saw it. And for Republicans to say, well, but there was an Antifa thing somewhere in Minneapolis, please.
No, there was a column somebody wrote in a weekly newspaper up in Seattle that was the cancel culture. So why are you talking about what Donald Trump did on January 6th? Literally, that's the quality of a lot of this.
That's right.
You take some random column.
And one more thing, just to be completely dark. It isn't just that Donald Trump did all those things, but that he did them all with the complete complicity of the Republican Party. And so one of our major political parties is now the party that's anti-democracy and anti-American. So great, have a nice day.
Yeah, so Sarah, what about this? I mean, it's there is this debate right now, I mean, are we going to, you have the Republican Accountability Project. Do we try to fix and save the Republican Party? Or at the end of this process, do you go, okay, man, you have told us who you are. You are thoroughly corrupt. You are irredeemable.
I do think that Tim Miller, who's in the chat, being the worst, it wrote a really good piece about this, though, where he broke it down between kind of like the people who do the right thing, the Fear Caucus, and the Q Caucus. And obviously, like, this party's going the way of Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and Donald Trump. Like, that's a fact. I do think, and have always argued for, anything that we can do to shore up the sane wing of the center right is important. That being said, it is also important to deny a party that is dangerous, as Mona just said, from having political power. And I think that, I don't think that they have thought through what this trial is going to mean. I mean, I think Amanda makes a good point. Like, party ID has been dropping precipitously for Republicans, as has positive sentiment towards the GOP. It's now 12 points behind where Democrats are, which is a problem for them, and is I think accurately, it actually doesn't even accurately reflect where they are. It's still too high. It's still too high. I just want to tag on, Mona's making the most excellent point that we don't take enough time, because you don't want to dignify their silly, not at all reasonable whataboutism. But I would just like to make one point. Has anybody, anytime people were burning things down over the summer, were any of them carrying a Biden flag? Did you see a single person saying, I'm doing this just because I love Joe Biden?
Fight for Biden, fight for Biden.
Or do they usually carry flags that are actually like, Biden's a fascist too, because they're all the same, whatever. You know, these are not things that happen under the banner of the Democratic Party or under the banner of a Democratic politician. Now, you could say certain Democratic politicians reacted poorly to it. You could say the media didn't always apply the right standards to it. Fine, you can have those debates, but don't say it's the same. These people took their Trump flags and they beat cops with them. Like, it's not the same thing. It's just not.
Yeah, nobody has ever beaten a cop or tried to impale a cop on a Joe Biden flag.
No, I think that's true. So Amanda, do you want to weigh in on this? The what about, we're going to get a lot of whataboutism over the next 48 hours. You just know it. It's going to be all, that's what you're going to hear from the lawyers, and you're going to get a lot of that on Fox News.
Yeah, I think that's an easy argument for, I mean, honestly, kind of the dumber people to make. But the smarter argument that has been coming up from the likes of Marco Rubio, Nancy Mace kind of tried this on MSNBC, but I don't think she even thought it through enough to spit it out clearly, was that this should just be handled in the courts. Yes, what Donald Trump did was terrible, but there should be criminal charges and it should be handled that way. And I wish every time someone advances that argument, you say, okay, so what crimes do you think he should be convicted of? Yeah. And since you were a witness to this crime, would you please write down your testimony and provide it? And would you be willing to testify in public against Trump? Right? So just follow that out. And will you go on record saying that, yes, he is guilty of crimes? That is something I would like to see. The other dodge is part of the constitutionality argument that I would like these questions to follow them. If they're going to keep saying, well, I didn't agree with the trial because he was a former president, you can't impeach a former president. Well, okay, if the trial was held while he was president, would you vote to convict? I mean, these are just logical questions. They need to go on the record at some point so that they can follow this trail down. But something I've also been thinking about today is what a low standard there is for impeachment. Like, you don't have to remove this president. The stakes are not high. All you are saying is that if we impeach the president, he can't run for office again. So yeah, if these things were so terrible that you think he should potentially be criminally prosecuted, why wouldn't you impeach him? I mean, if you think he's guilty of a crime, we don't even have to remove him. This is such a low stakes impeachment. What is the harm if you think that he's possibly guilty of criminal action? So those are just things I'm thinking through, because I'm going to be asking people this for the rest of my life, probably.
Yeah, there's no excuse. It's not like, well, if we impeach him, we don't get judges, or we don't get tax cuts, or we won't get the wonderful regulatory. You get nothing from this guy. But you think about the argument in favor of conviction, that you would have this bipartisan, by definition, statement that this was that this attack on our democracy is totally not acceptable, that no one can use the office of the presidency in order to try to hold on to power by nullifying an election. It would be this dramatic statement about democracy, about the importance of protecting democracy and against violence. The flip side is that you don't draw that line because you think it's not going to happen again. But here's the thing, historically, just because you've had one failed coup doesn't mean you're not going to have another failed coup. I mean, there have been people who've had putsches who
try again.
It doesn't work. It doesn't. No, it's like you've shown the vulnerability. And I will say that argument that they made that Donald Trump will do it again is particularly scary because, this constituency for this kind of attitude, it's not the majority, but it's out there. I mean, JVL in his newsletter had this new survey, what is the American Perspectives survey that showed, let me see if I can pull up the number here, like 55% of Republicans say they support the use of force to stop the decline of the traditional American way of life.
What does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
Well, okay, well, then there's another question. 39% of Republicans support Americans taking violent action if elected officials fail to act. I don't know what it means, but it means that there's not the stigma to it that you might hope, that we didn't shut the door on the crazy. I mean, there was a time when if somebody said, well, we need to get our guns and go, no, you don't do that. We have a democratic system. We have a peaceful transfer of power. If you've convinced millions of people that you don't have a peaceful transfer of power, that it's not a legitimate process, then in fact, we have opened the door to this kind of violence. And if Donald Trump comes out of this, doing the high fives that he's been exonerated for this kind of conduct, we have, sown a possible future whirlwind. And I think that's a really legitimate concern. And I saw that one of the Republican senators, who said he actually made a note of it? Was it Senator Rounds? He said that he wrote that down. Now he'll vote to acquit. He'll vote to acquit it. But it did strike him that warning about the future needed to be taken seriously.
But they didn't get that warning during the first impeachment? Did they sleep through the first movie?
Sorry, pretty much.
The first movie was really bad, but it wasn't an invasion of the Capitol.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think there's a difference between, in public impact and between, an abusive, self-interested call to a foreign head of state who most people have never heard of, and guys with pitchforks, and there were no torches, but storming into the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first time around was, hey, this is a really important pamphlet. You need to read it thoroughly, and then we will have questions. This is like, freaking Midway, the movie. And so it could have a different consequence. So, Sarah, you follow this sort of thing. The story about the state level Republican parties, which has really become extraordinary. For a while it was like, hey, the Virginia Republican Party has kind of gone crazy. Wait, look, the Texas Republican Party has gone crazy. Then it's the Oregon Republican Party. Then it's the Hawaii Republican Party. So
Arizona, Michigan.
Exactly. It's like you kind of run down. It's like, so I don't know whether that's representative of the Republican rank and file voter, but there's something going on, isn't there? It is, I think a lot of people had been hoping that Donald Trump leaves, he's defeated. Then it's time to turn the page, and then we can have this rational discussion of what the Republican Party becomes. And it's like, shit, no, it's the Republican Party seems like, at least at the organized state level. So what's going on? Amanda, do you have some insight into this? Is it the self-selection of crazy people?
It seems like the memo certainly went out from, guessing the RNC on down, that after the riot happened, you have to circle the wagons and double down. I don't think it's a coincidence that all these state parties suddenly started censuring anybody that said a negative word about Donald Trump the second after the riots. That just isn't a coincidence that it all happened. But the person I am most curious about is this Senate Majority Leader from Michigan, Mike Shirkey.
Yeah, what the hell happened there?
Turning up in the news. I don't know. I've got to do a deep dive on it, because I think if I figure out what happened with him, that will explain some other things. But I stepped on the question you asked, Sarah.
You say it's interesting that all of these parties are censuring people for criticizing Donald Trump only after the riot. Nobody criticized Donald Trump until after the riot. Pretty much. So
that's true. Yeah.
Well, I think Amanda's point was that that clearly it was a coordinated idea that anybody who spoke out was going to get censured, that these state parties were doing. And here's the thing, the activist base. So what happened was, when Donald Trump got elected, right, you saw a lot of resignations from the state party chairs who were like, I'm not going to deal with this. And like that, as Charlie's always called it, the recessive gene of the Republican Party, represented by Sarah Palin and Pat Buchanan, suddenly became ascendant. And it took over all the state parties. And now they're all crazy. And crazy, like Texas says they should secede from the union, their state party.
This is the next big thing. Just watch. Secession. It's going to be a thing.
I'm afraid you're right,
Charlie. The Arizona woman was just reelected despite, for the first time, turning Arizona blue. The Hawaii group endorsed QAnon before having to delete their Twitter. The state party, they censured Ben Sasse for voting that it was constitutional. Right. The Michigan person that Amanda's talking about, which I think is actually even crazier, because that guy runs the Senate in Michigan. Yep. He's not the state party chair of Arkansas. He runs the Senate in Michigan, a blue, like a state that like Joe Biden won. And he was on tape saying that the entire insurrection was pre-planned, was done by the left. Like, it's this whole false flag theory that is nuts. That was like done by Antifa. He's on camera saying it. And like, I don't know whether the bat signal went out that that's what we're saying now or what, but like, this party has lost its mind. It is no longer tethered to reality. And I'll tell you, it's not a Republican problem. It's an American problem because it's too many people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We should actually do an entire...
And there's another, you know, in a two-party system, both parties win sometimes.
Yes.
And when one party is insane and anti-democratic, it's still a two-party system,
That's
right?
scary.
And still there's going to be, there's going to come a day when the incumbent Democrats have gotten fat and lazy, and there's been some corruption scandals, and Joe Biden is 96 and everybody still likes him, but it really is time for a change. You know, that day's gonna come, right? No, you know, and
Marjorie Taylor Greene will be rested and ready.
Exactly, and that is
Let's not talk about her workouts.
Thing.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, 2032. Bet on it, you know. Oh, I mean, as an indication, this guy, I don't know him, Josh Mandel, who is the Republican running for Senate in Ohio. Didn't he used to be the Ohio State treasurer? I mean, he used to be considered like a reasonable Republican.
He was good. He was good. I've been in his office.
Was he?
He was totally normal. He was like a Mitt Romney guy.
Okay, but now he's not only MAGA, he's like insanely hair on fire MAGA.
No, now
guy,
it's out of control.
Saying, I am running, I want to be like Ted Cruz and, you know, Senator Scott, who objected to the Electoral College. And I'm going to be, I mean, it's just, and that's his calculation, that this is the way you advance in Republican politics, is to be as insane as possible. You know, and you think of Michigan, I mean, all of the normal antibodies aren't working. So you would think that after that plot was uncovered with Governor Whitmer to capture her and to kill her, that there would be that moment where everybody would pull back and go, whoa, we got to dial down the rhetoric. We got to be careful here, right? Because there are people out there with guns who are going to commit terrible, terrible acts, you know? Or when the election official in Georgia came out and said, Mr. President, people are going to die, people are going to get shot, then everybody would go, okay, all right, take a deep breath here. We have disagreements, but we really need to be more careful. None of that happened.
But maybe that's why they're not. Maybe that's why they're not. Maybe they're more intimidated than the Michigan women. That's what I think. I mean, the fact that Cherokee can sit down with these nut jobs and can't tell them the truth, he's afraid of that.
I want to suggest that there is an antibody working.
Please.
It's so it's just working slowly, and that's that Republicans are losing.
Yeah.
And you know, we forget, but it was only 4 years ago that Republicans were solidly in control of all three political branches. They lost the House 2 years ago. They lost the presidency and the Senate this year. And, you know, there is a price that they're paying for this craziness. And maybe they're not paying it as heavily as I would want to see. I wanted to see the wipeout in this election. But, you know, there is a lag time between when you start paying the price and when it empowers the group of people within the party who are capable of recalibrating things. And I do think the first thing that has to happen is a lot more Republicans need to lose.
Republicans don't think they're losing, though. I mean, I was talking about this with Bill Kristol the other day on the podcast. They think they're doing just fine. You know, they think they're poised to take the House. They think, hey, the Senate was kind of this fluke in Georgia. They're actually feeling pretty good about themselves. They control gerrymandering still in the states. They control the state houses.
You know, and they were convinced Donald Trump was going to win too. And like there's some.
I hope you're right.
I mean, there's some level of delusion that reality has a way of catching up with. Now, if you're Q, you just change the rules, right? And that's where the really scary thought comes in, right? If reality falsifies my beliefs, I just deny reality. But eventually a political party can't behave that way.
But a quick point on that. I mean, that's what's happening in Georgia. Even the Georgia officials who don't believe the big election lie are still catering to the lie by introducing ideas for voting restrictions and saying, well, they are all on record acknowledging that the mail-in ballots were fine, right? They counted them 3 times, but now they're out there saying, well, the mail-in ballots are the most vulnerable, so we're going to put more restrictions on that going forward. I mean, this is part of the delusion, is that the map is in favor of the Republicans, and now they are going to restrict voting. I think that is the next fight that is starting now. It started last week, and these Republicans say, yeah, we don't believe the election lie, but we're going to signal to the base that we will do something about it by restricting voting.
So that, I think they're going to have, I mean, look, they have some latitude to do that in the States. It's going to be much harder to do with a Justice Department that actually doesn't want to play ball with that than it has been the last few years. And, you know, this is something that, you know, the president already nominated a Civil Rights Division head, which is, you know, that's pretty fast for that division. And I think this is something, you know, voting rights and hate crimes are going to be the thing that the Civil Rights Division spends the next few years on. So I do think there'll be pushback in the other direction from that.
That's interesting. And of course, there's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which they could possibly push through. Okay, so we're out of time, basically. Let's go around the table. Last words. Want to get in the last shot here? Mona Charen. You got a last shot, I can tell.
This is a much bigger subject than we have time for at the very end, but I'll throw it out there, and maybe on another one of our Thursday night panels we can get into it more. But it'll be useful, I think, for us to go backwards in time a little bit and look at when the base of the Republican Party became the power center rather than the lead, right? They became the leaders. How did that happen? I mean, Tim Alberta's book, American Carnage, has some incredible stuff in it, including a vignette about a member who was considered kind of crazy by John Boehner, and he didn't want to appoint her to a particular committee. And he said, no, you're out of here, no way. And she said, no, you will appoint me to this committee or I will get Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity down your ass so fast. And he gave her the committee slot, okay, which was a symbol of how the power was shifting. It was, the power really belonged to those who control the base. And who controls the base?
That's the story.
Limbaugh, Hannity, Fox News, etc. And so until we get a handle on who's feeding this stuff to the base, we're not going to be able to handle the Republican officials who are responding to that base.
Sarah?
That was an excellent point.
Yes.
One we don't talk about enough. Thanks to everybody in the chat who's been talking about the French Village. I would just like to do a quick thing, which is that it's really excellent. And I'm glad so many of you are watching it. And if anybody wants a spin-off French Village podcast, really thinking about starting one with somebody who's not JVL. FYI.
I'm going to like this. I'm going to like the French Village.
You're going to love it. Okay. Love.
Guys, why aren't you watching it? What are you even doing with your life? It's the best.
No, it's not. It's okay. It's beautifully done. I've tried to watch a couple episodes. It is too close to real life for me right now to handle. I will watch it in like 3 years. Okay.
You got to stick with it though. You get the first couple episodes are tough, but you got to keep going.
Real life is scary enough.
You mean that your life, you're being occupied by, foreign fascists who or manipulating truth. And this is not your idea of relaxing entertainment, Amanda.
The characters seem a little too similar. I don't know.
It's a meditation on accountability and complicity. There is literally nothing more trenchantly related to what's happening right now than this.
Can I watch the end
Amanda's
and get
point.
The answers?
She gets that from life.
Yeah.
That's right. Just turn on CNN and you get that.
Yeah, but for the record, Sarah, I have tried it. I've tried it and I just my brain shorted
up.
See,
my grandkids are French and they live in a French village, so I have to do this. I have to watch this. It would be great. Hey, and thanks
landscapes.
All of you who have joined us. We appreciate it. This is one of the benefits of Bulwark Plus membership. We are very, very grateful. We do not take it for granted. We are here for the fight, and we are incredibly grateful for all of you for joining us tonight on tonight's live stream. And we'll do this again next Thursday night. Thanks.
Virtual hugs.